Captain Picard. Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
My Readier Room.
Hello and welcome to the Readier Room, the only Star Trek The Next Generation rewatch podcast with on-the-set stories from those who were there to watch the magic happen. My name is Mitchell Mells, Chief Consultant of Services to the stars at Paramount in the 1980s, and with me is my life partner, Brandon Hobbs, Head of Resources Management. Brandon, how are we doing today?
Doing wonderful as usual, Mitch.
Yeah?
Happy to be here.
Are you? Yeah,
Kinda. I think so.
That's good, because I'm super excited to be here, as always. This is
Wow.
episode number 11, I believe, of the podcast.
Yep.
And those two ones, those are us coming together to make some great memories and relive the glory of the next generation. Which by
That's
now,
such a beautiful way to put it.
yeah, thank you. By now, it's the previous generation, but really, what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, I mean, it'll always be the next generation, though. That's for sure.
So before we get into this week's episode of Star Trek, we have, as always, a question of the week from one of our fans. This one comes from the Twitter sphere, so you could say I heard it from a little bird asked me this question. This one comes from user Deoshi's Prime. I think I'm saying that right.
Deoshi's Prime, huh?
It's something like that. I think that's like a Deep Space Nine character.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and for the fans, you know, we're Trek fans, of course, but we're not we're not really walking encyclopedias or anything like some of you are. So
No.
You guys might be a little bit ahead of us on this sort of thing. So you know, just be patient with the DS9 references.
I'm sure, you know, at home they're like, no, the X is silent.
Right, yeah.
Mea culpa. It's my fault. All right, anyway, so Deoshis asks, quote, given the much documented problems with TNG Season 1, how much did you worry behind the scenes that the show might get canceled? And,
boy.
That's a really good question. So as Deoshis noted, the first season in a lot of ways did not go smoothly, basically at all, and that was not lost on us on set. At every level of the production, almost, people were always looking for other jobs to fall back on once we got word that the production was being shuttered. And that was, you know, crew, like cameramen, grips, people working in prop department, even some of the actors, and most famously, Denise was always looking for other work, and she kind of prematurely left in anticipation of the show's cancellation.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of attitude really defined the production of that first season. I think whenever there was a mistake on set, or like an actor flubbed their lines or something, everybody kind of had this attitude, like, who cares? You know, we're not going to be here in a year. You know, why bother making it perfect? Which I can't really blame anybody for. And I had a little bit of that myself at the time.
Definitely.
Not going to pretend I'm above anybody. But the only person who can say that they were above others is Gene, actually. Gene never took part in the dooming that was going on, of course. He always insisted that, you know, they'll all see, in reference to the American audiences at the time who weren't so keen on TNG. He kind of had that as a motto to center himself, like a mantra almost, just repeating that under his breath over and over as a source of motivation. Right. And it worked, I guess. It pulled him and the series itself through in a way. Gene was right, astoundingly.
Yeah, I mean, I can only guess that he must have some kind of psychic energy,
right?
Or something like that. Yeah. Because he really pulled us through. He got us through that first season. If not for him, we wouldn't be here right now.
Exactly.
We would be talking about I don't know,
Battlestar
our
Galactica.
time, yeah, Battlestar Galactica, my time on the set of Alf.
Yeah, alien life form.
Great show.
Great show. He ate cats. Little known fact about Alf.
Yeah.
So I think every production in television needs to have that captain of the ship, right? Somebody there just guiding everyone else along, like a chaperone almost. And Gene was very good at that. He always stepped up to take that role. So formally, Definitely. I'll say thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Gene. Not Eugene, mind you, but thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Gene.
So, that brings us to this week's episode, which I believe is episode 11. It's always difficult. I'm sure I'll go back when I'm putting the show together after we record, like, oh no, that was actually 10 or whatever.
And next episode will also be number 11. So yeah, it's the big goodbye. It's the big goodbye. Big goodbye. And not the long goodbye. Not the tall goodbye.
Not the grand goodbye either.
Not the heavy goodbye. The big goodbye. And this was actually the first and only episode of TNG to win a Peabody Award.
Yeah.
And I remember we were all very proud of that.
I mean, who wouldn't be stoked to get the illustrious Peabody?
It was huge. I think the award was for, God, what category was it? I think it was something like most creative, low-budget period piece filler episode in a sci-fi series. And I do need to stress to the audience that there was some particularly strong competition for that year. So
we really pulled it out. We got it.
Yeah, just absolutely beautiful.
Go
ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I got nothing to say.
I was gonna say that we joke, but when you watch this episode, that is the attitude you get from it. It really does feel like an unsubstantial piece of filler that's completely inconsequential to anything. And not that TNG has a very serialized plot, because it doesn't, but even within this episode itself, the stakes just couldn't be lower.
Sure, and I agree with that, but I also want to say that, we obviously had fun with this on set, and I think a lot of that really bleeds through in, the final episode itself when you're watching it.
It does feel fun, and it's nice because part of the how it's presented in the script in the show itself is that the characters themselves are just engaging in a pleasure activity. They're just doing this for fun.
Yeah, and so it's pretty different from what we've seen so far in TNG, and everyone's a fish out of water in this episode.
Yeah, not just
I don't
Data.
know if that's good or bad. Yeah, not just Data. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but I will say that it's fun to see Picard in that way, because he's usually so reserved and measured and stoic. In this episode, not only do we see him actually enjoying himself, but we get to see him confused by the things going on around him.
Right.
And in an innocent kind of way for most of it.
Compare that to Picard's reaction when Riker is flexing his Q powers in Q Who or Q and Seek,
right.
Hide and Q.
Hide and Q. Q Who was much later.
Where it's like, oh, it's this extra dimensional godlike being, and Picard has the whole trajectory of the interaction charted in his head, and he's like, all right, go ahead, see what happens. Whereas in this episode, there's a minor holodeck malfunction, and Picard's just like completely beside himself in befuddlement. It's
just very I don't know.
I know, I like it. I just think that this is a better treatment of Picard in a threatening situation than that one was.
No, yeah, you're right. It absolutely is.
And Crusher also has a lot of fun moments. Not before the threat presents itself.
Yeah, before someone dies.
Yeah.
Or nearly dies.
before someone
Yeah,
gets
she
fucking
does.
wrecked.
She does. As always, I kind of want to start out at the beginning, right?
One day we'll start at the end. One day.
Yeah, one day we'll actually it'll be like an event kind of episode where we just start at the end of an episode and work our way back. So the episode opens with Troy talking to Picard, right?
Yes, they are preparing to meet some aliens.
Oh, the aliens! I totally forgot about the aliens I guess this episode kind of almost doesn't have an A and B plot. I guess that's the B plot.
Very
I guess
barely.
It's the B plot. There's such a fine line between the two because they're both so informed by each other which is a good thing. So yeah, the aliens. God, these are fun. So this is probably going to be obvious for longtime watchers of Trek, or even this show. But the aliens in this episode, they actually had a real life racial analog, right?
Right, as they often do.
And yeah, and I'll give the audience a couple of seconds to maybe guess which race they might represent. So Tomei, the writer for the episode, he really had a vision for these guys as like this bug-like hive mind with just weird customs that you'd have to follow to a T, or you'd get blown up for dishonoring them, right?
Right.
Which does shine through in the final product. That vision was fairly well represented. And so, what race are they? And yeah, if you guess Japanese, you'd be right.
Well, it helps that the name is also very clearly Japanese.
Right,
inspired.
and what is the name?
Harada.
Harada. Common Japanese name.
Right.
The way they got around this, however, not that you'd ever know this just from watching the episode, they spell Harada with a J, so it's like a Spanish word.
Yeah, that was weird in a weird way when I saw that in the script and then later on in the subtitles. It's like, why? Was it not alien enough to just use an H that you had to throw a J in there?
Well, Spanish is a very alien language.
Yeah, well, when we were doing the table read, I distinctly remember people just saying Gerada or Gerada.
Yeah. I'm surprised that didn't bleed into the final episode, with all the weird miscommunications in pronunciation,
right.
With daimon and daemon.
Well, it's key to unlocking the racial analog to pronounce it with an H. Like once you get the J in there, it kind of loses some of that, the hard J.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can see why the writer might have taken extra steps to ensure that things were correct on the set. Whereas like daimon, very inconsequential to the theming and message of that episode. Yeah,
these things were Tomei's babies. He really, really thought a lot about these guys.
We should clarify that this was not Marissa Tomei, but a different Tomei.
Right, not Marissa Tomei. Possibly related. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
You know how Hollywood is.
Yeah. you know who runs Hollywood. So one of the interesting things about these aliens is that they just never show up in the episode.
Which I think is a very good visual metaphor for the strength of this B plot.
Well, so there's a lot of misinformation online about this because, you go and read the Memory Alpha wiki, for example, and they're saying that, the aliens were cut because of budget constraints, right? This is it's simply not true. The decision not to show the Harada was completely intentional. It was supposed to be a metaphor, actually, for the insidiousness of the Japanese, like, behind-the-scenes influence on the American economy at the time. They were like an economic superpower. And
that's the thing. It's important to keep the time frame of when this was made in mind. Like,
right.
Some of the decision making wouldn't quite fly today, but at the time, these were rationales and ideas that people were getting behind. And Gene himself saw this and kind of gave the green light. So,
and much of it did come from Gene too. So yeah, lots of kind of subtle commentary on the world as it was back in the 80s. That's what makes TNG so interesting.
It is.
That's why it holds up today.
It's a bit of a time capsule in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's stronger for it. There's a lot of shows that one might say are timeless in that they're not beholden to any trend or attitude of a specific time or place, but really, they don't have the multi-layered ability to be analyzed like something like TNG does, where you have to peel back the surface and look at what was happening at the time. It's like it's like an old novel in the way. You read a Charles Dickens novel and it's like, well, this is really long because he got paid by the word, and that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it adds another layer. Whereas
it does.
You watch something like Star Wars with the movie and from the 70s, and that you could have made that anytime. It's got nothing extra going on.
There's just no substance to it at all. I mean, what are you really getting from it?
Exactly. Whereas TNG has a lot to give you.
Yeah. And, that's why we are one of 500 online podcasts about Star Trek The Next Generation.
It's a great community to be a part of.
There's just so much to talk about.
Indeed. Like TNG.
So, yeah, like TNG. So let's continue talking about TNG.
I'm in.
So the Harada, they have this custom that only the captain can perform. Well, he has to say something.
They have a custom about honor, and to them, anybody but the captain addressing them is an act of dishonor, and communicating to them in their language anything but perfectly is also dishonorable. Like if you mix up a word or pronounce something incorrectly. And that is the subject of Troy and Picard's conversation. Picard is practicing his speech that he's going to address the Harada with.
That's right. That's right.
Practicing the phonetics and the pronunciation of their language. And here, I don't know if you predicted that I would have a problem with this, but this is already completely nonsensical.
I have the same problem.
Because that's just not how communication works in Star Trek. People don't all learn each other's languages and speak to them in those languages. They speak to each other in their language, and it's universally translated. So both when Picard is practicing talking to them in their language, and when the Harada they later speak to the Enterprise in English, neither of that makes sense given the established universe of Star Trek.
Right. And you continue to bring this up, Mitch.
I'm a language
pretty much every
fetishist.
other episode. Yeah. I don't know if the audience is sick of it yet, but I appreciate you sticking to your guns here.
I'm never gonna let this go. Just wait until we get to Darmok. No, the Darmok actually makes sense. That's the thing about it. It's if you take the established Star Trek lore insofar as communication and languages, Darmok checks out astoundingly.
It does check out though, doesn't it? Because they're speaking English.
Right. It's
just a fragmented English.
Well, the problem isn't the language itself. It's just the structure of it and the meaning of it.
Exactly.
And speaking in metaphor like that, you could say those metaphors in any language, and if you don't know the meaning, you're not going to know the meaning, which is
right.
Which is the whole point. Which is why Darmok is such a smartly written episode compared to not like this whole episode, but this part of this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, anyone who has a problem with Darmok for that reason, because, there's been plenty of them, suck it. It's a great episode.
It is a great episode.
So that was not my issue with this scene, but I do have several.
Okay, well, I'm in for this. I'm in for several.
So Troy is talking to Picard about taking a break, taking a breather, using the holodeck or whatever.
Because he's been working so hard.
Yes, yeah. Troy's the ship's psychologist, right?
Mm.
So, mind you, Picard does not spend any time in therapy with her, ever. Because he's Picard. So, just going by the dialogue in this scene, several questions were raised to me. Why does Troy know Picard's interests so intimately?
Mm.
Why does Troy personally program the holodeck for Picard for this this story. Did Picard order someone to program this? Because it doesn't seem like something he would do. And why has Picard never used the holodeck before, or a holodeck before, when Wesley Crusher clearly knows exactly what a holodeck is? And in fact, later on in the episode, some time is even spent on a captain's log from Picard where he just gushes about how realistic the holodeck is. And then he does the same thing in a meeting with his staff.
Yeah, that was weird. But wasn't there some dialogue about the holodeck recently receiving an upgrade or something? Am I crazy?
Oh, you may be right about that. We'll have to double check that. I mean, if we're wrong, the audience can tell us here.
Right.
They can get mad at us.
Because that would explain some of this, where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
this new holodeck is much more realistic, or, can do a lot more. Whereas just like, oh, I was in the holodeck and I saw an automobile isn't, they can do that either way. That's not really going to amaze Picard like it should.
An automobile?
I enjoyed the subtitles on that exchange.
Yeah.
Where it's like, automobile with a V. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, mobile. Yeah, that's right. He says it with a V.
Just great world building.
Yeah, but see, none of that really answers the questions of who programmed this, why.
Yeah, and it's when you see people program the holodeck in later episodes, it's very specific in what they ask for. There's a really, I don't know if it's a really good scene, but there's a scene several seasons later where a group of people are programming the holodeck in tandem to like reconstruct a joint memory that they all have. And
right.
In that scene, the dialogue to do so is incredibly specific. Like, computer, create a chair, brown, with a footrest, mid 20th century design, about a meter long or whatever, but a lot of specifics about it, such that to program this 1940s San Franciscan landscape would be a quite involved endeavor.
It absolutely would. So maybe Picard did order someone to program that.
But Troy?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Just the fact that Troy is like, oh, your simulation is ready and waiting, sir. Why is she involved in any way? Did she do it?
Yeah, I can fathom a universe where it's like, all right, doctor's orders, as the counselor, you need to go relax. So I had somebody from engineering program this for you, but that would need to like establish this patient counselor relationship that Picard is just never seen to have had with Troy.
Then she'd need to like ruffle through his Dixon Hill books tucked away in his office,
right,
or his room.
And it's up until now, Picard has been established as like just a crotchety old like asshole.
He's standoffish.
Yeah, he's not the kind of person to ever go into therapy, let alone engage with it on a sufficiently deep level that this would make sense.
Right.
So
he's not going to volunteer information about himself like this.
No. So there's a lot. I think that's a theme of this episode, in that there's a lot of things unsaid and implied and missing. Missing is a better way to put it. There's a lot of things missing.
Yes.
Where that's going to be recurring as we go on. But so that establishes our two plots. There's the A plot, and with the holodeck stuff, and the B plot with the Harada stuff. Give me 1 second. I have to go kill a very threatening spider.
Oh, okay.
Oh my god. Yeah, shit. I'm back. I'm readier.
Okay.
Just gonna leave that in.
Perfect.
So, anyway, that establishes our A and B plots. for the episode. And you might be thinking, well, I know which one is the A plot and I know which one's the B plot, but I don't think under any conventional reasoning would anybody ever arrive at the thought that, yeah, all this holodeck San Francisco bullshit is going to be our A plot, and this very politically based, tense alien interaction is going to be the B plot. But such is life.
There it is. The first of many holodeck episodes that we had to do when everyone ran out of ideas.
And so it kind of running out of ideas. It might not surprise anybody to know that this episode initially began its life as one of those Sherlock Holmes scripts that we always got sent in. Long-time listeners will remember the Sherlock Holmes guy, but by this point we were still a little naive about the whole thing, and we weren't exactly as hostile.
Jaded
is another way to put it. Whereas we took that script and we're like, we can rework this. We don't always want to go to the Sherlock Holmes well, so let's find another famous mystery writer and character. And what we landed on was Raymond Chandler, who created the character, what was his name? Philip Marlowe. It was the name of his character.
Yes.
And if you're familiar with mystery novels, then the title of this episode probably already gave that away. Because this is The Big Goodbye, and Raymond Chandler wrote The Long Goodbye, which starred that character, Philip Marlowe, a detective, very much like Dixon Hill. Basically, a mirror of what we see in the episode. The plan initially was to just have those names used, like reference them by name. But the guy's estate, Raymond Chandler's estate, just really, really hated Star Trek. They loathed it.
Oh, for good reason.
Well, I mean, it's going back to the original series. They just really couldn't stand the sight of that interracial kiss that broke new ground on television. Yeah. So, because of that, the estate held a grudge. And by the time we came to them and we asked them, like, oh, can we use these names in our scripts, in our television show? They were like, hell no, you absolutely cannot. Very vehemently. Which we weren't expecting. We just thought we'd come in, clear the rights, leave, and call it a day.
Yeah, simple.
Right, which is what happened with the Sherlock Holmes stuff. It wasn't in the public domain by that point. And
right.
No, it was the exact opposite. It was just a very difficult process that we ultimately got denied in. And by that point, we couldn't just rewrite the whole script, so we just changed a few names and kept everything else basically the same. Even the title, which we kind of, how we have it here, The Big Goodbye, that doesn't really make sense, right? Goodbyes don't have a size.
Right.
But
they're not usually big.
We kept it this way almost as a slight to that estate, We're going to reference your work whether you like it or not, and now it's in a way you can't interfere with. So, taste it. But
I mean, disgusting stuff, really.
And that takes us to the holodeck stuff, because once Picard enters the holodeck, he enters a 1940s like gumshoe detective novel, essentially.
Right.
And it's kind of cool. I didn't think I would ever say that, but it's kind of cool. Like
I actually agree with you.
Right?
I agree with you. Much to my chagrin.
Yeah, it begrudgingly works in a way.
Yeah. We were lucky too, because we got to just borrow all the set stuff from the drama, The Next Lot Over.
Right.
That was in production at the time. So that was really cool.
That's a recurring theme in any time we have one of these holodeck episodes or like a time travel episode. It's what we got on the lot.
Yeah. I mean, we're not just willy-nilly making period pieces because we feel like it.
That would be ridiculous.
That would be insane. Picard walks into Dixon Hill's office in his Star Trek uniform. His assistant says they're going to send him to the funny farm. How
do you feel about that old-timey dialogue that permeates the entire episode?
I thought it was great.
Oh yeah, it's fun. They say like funny farm. They're calling women toots.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that was pretty good. That was good. Yeah. Lots of that. Very well written, I must say, in terms of the dialogue.
It is, and it's also like very obviously a joke.
Right.
It's not. None of this is serious. This whole episode is pretty tongue in cheek in how it approaches things. Aside from like, the guy getting shot. But other than that, it's very silly stuff, which is fun.
Again, we were all having fun with it. So, and again, you see that everywhere. I do have one thing I want to note in that Picard walks into his office past his desk and opens the blinds and peeks outside.
Mm-hmm.
And the stock footage is such that it looks like a car is about to crash into his building.
The angle is completely wrong.
I don't know if you noticed that.
Of course I did. It's because he's supposed to be on like the second floor. He's looking down.
Yeah.
And then the footage is on level with the car, which, like you said, is just driving right at the camera. And there's no physical space for it to take a turn as it would if things were more appropriate. So that was jarring and obvious in a not so good way, but it's whatever. It's stock footage. What are you gonna do?
It's a split second. Who cares?
And Picard has this initial excursion into the holodeck where he's dressed in his Starfleet uniform, and all the entities inside the holodeck, I don't know what you call them, these golems, they're all commenting on it. And it's cool because Picard's like reacting to everything like in a very childlike way. We mentioned this before. I don't like the metaphysics of him leaving after this first time. With that lipstick on his face. Yeah.
We see this function a couple times this episode, and we see that get retconned pretty quickly in later holodeck episodes.
It also had that in the pilot episode when I think Wesley Crusher is like falls in a lake in the holodeck and he leaves soaking wet.
Was he still wet when he walked out?
He was.
Huh. I guess I was just trying to tune that whole episode out when we watched it.
It was like 3 hours long. So
that should have been the big goodbye.
This is the glaring flaw with this episode about things missing. What's missing from this episode in a large way is science. There's no science in this science fiction.
Yes, which violates one of the gene rules.
Exactly. Problematic. And this is where you start seeing hints of that. It's like, why is that lipstick still on Picard's face? The most egregious of this is when they attempt to provide an explanation for the threat that eventually befalls the characters. Another character just tells them to shut up. I don't want the explanation. Just whatever.
You just hand wave it away.
Exactly. In the most obvious way possible. To just say, the line is literally, I don't want an explanation. Just do
it. Which is completely out of character, too.
Yes. And that, we'll get to that later, I guess, because there's a lot of not great character moments that feel wrong in that exchange. But so Picard leaves the holodeck, he goes to this meeting, and he tells everybody what a holodeck is. Worf and Data don't really know what a car is, despite the fact that they all go riding in a dune buggy in one of the films.
I did appreciate in that meeting, he's going on and on and on about the holodeck, and then after he realizes he's been talking about it for like 5 minutes straight, he just stops and then immediately like turns heel to talk about the meeting content.
Right.
I thought that was some pretty funny delivery.
It was. That was a good moment. I enjoy the fact that the meeting had nothing of substance to it when they do set to talk about what's going on.
Yes.
Because they're like, okay, so we're meeting the Harada, right? And everybody's like, right. And then they're like, oh, Captain, you have to give a very tense speech. And everybody's like, he knows that, Data. Don't tell him. And then they're like, all right, meeting adjourned. No new information. Nothing was discussed.
We just got Troy getting angry at Data.
Right.
What?
That's why they convened the meeting, so that Data could make a social faux pas.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, they needed to introduce Data to this plot somehow.
Right. Yes.
We're treated to some more Sherlock Holmes between him and Geordi, which was a nice little shout out to the fan that wrote the script. We kept a couple of his lines in.
Yeah, we'd end up regretting that, as that added fuel to his proverbial fire.
It did. One thing I do want to just note here is that the end of that scene where they're walking through the hallway and Geordi says, "Indubitably, my dear Data," with that just the smuggest grin. And at this point, I really just feel like the show is kind of taking a shit on me. You know,
it's not. No part about that is endearing, right? It's all
no, not at all. Not
insufferable.
At all. It is. That's exactly what it is. It's insufferable. It's cliche. Just stop it. I thought we were over this with the last Sherlock episode, but
no, I
guess not.
It's like, I need you to know that I read the book, so I'm going to quote the most obvious line from it. He was one step away from calling things elementary.
So
that's the question, though. Did Data need to be introduced to this plot? Like that? Yes, that.
Not at all. Not at all. No.
Right, because he doesn't do anything.
He ruins it.
Nor does he really serve to. His usual role is like a fish out of water. Everybody's taking that role, so he doesn't add anything.
No, we just get to see him be wacky, essentially.
Some funny South America jokes.
Yeah, I mean, most of his stuff is slapstick in this episode. You know, him playing with the lamp and stuff like that. It's just silly.
That lamp thing was so weird. It's like, what, Data doesn't know that things have a power source? He's like,
and you think he would with all the 20th century books he's read.
Right, he read the entire series of these books. They show him doing that. Like,
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
computer, load every Dixon Hill novel, and then it's like, oh,
maybe Dixon Hill never plugs in a lamp.
That might be that's got to be true, I guess. But yeah, it's the same thing with the cars. It's people, writers, going too far out of their way to establish that this is the future. It's like, oh, what is an automobile? What do you mean you have to plug something in for it to have power?
And that's the thing. Like, we have a problem with this now, but if they had just made these characters aware of these kinds of things, no one would have batted an eye.
Right. No one's gonna be like, oh, what? How does Worf know what a car is? What?
Right.
Presumably, every society.
He was raised by...
Yeah. Oh, he was raised by humans. You're right. Oh my god. But presumably, every society that has reached space travel has at some point created locomotion on their own planet, the wheel.
Yeah. It's kind of a prerequisite to create the wheel in order to evolve in any meaningful way.
I call this stupid sci-fi because it's clearly.
You're going to coin that term?
I'm going to coin that term. It's stupid sci-fi because it's very clearly in service of being science fiction, of establishing otherworldliness and the future and advancement. But it's just such a boneheaded way of doing it that when you actually think about it, it does not make any sense. It's
ham-fisted. It's worse than ham-fisted.
Yeah, it's like
it's just contradictory to itself. Yeah.
There's something else on this, a very similar topic. When Picard's in the holodeck for the first time, and I wrote this down in my notes, somebody says that he's ready for Halloween. Because
I wrote that down too.
And Picard says Halloween as if he doesn't know what it is, despite Picard's entire character being like a historian, archaeologist, well versed in Earth's history first and foremost. And he's just never heard of Halloween, an internationally celebrated holiday for centuries.
And that exchange goes nowhere, by the way. He just says Halloween, and then they move on.
Which is great that all of these confusing moments also serve no point.
So yeah, really they could have just kept that out, and we could have pretended that Picard knew what Halloween was, as he should. I struggle to believe that Halloween doesn't exist in the future.
Yeah, because it's not something that is tied to any particular piece of technology such that it could become outdated. It's,
I mean, maybe they got fed up with cultural appropriation in the future, like too many white girls dressing up as Indians,
or cats.
too many white girls dressing up as Klingons, you know.
My
And
costume
they were
is
just
sexy Klingon.
Yeah, I would like to see that actually.
Well, we had a little bit of that when Riker provided Worf with a wife to have sex with on the bridge.
That's true. We do get we do get some of that later too.
It's true.
So just patience.
So here's a question. Picard, who by this point has gotten the Enterprise out of 10 jams where he's had to, apply his critical thinking skills and solve problems, solve mysteries to do his job. Would he really find being a detective to be his form of escape and relaxation?
I think so.
Yeah?
I think so, yeah, because it's there's no stakes. I mean, he's read the book.
As he notes.
Yeah. He sits there and tells these characters, these golems, as you aptly called them, that he has read the book, which you would think would kind of take him out of it to make that meta reference.
Right.
And they don't even acknowledge it either, so another weird throwaway line. But yeah, I do think that this is in line with Picard's character for sure.
Fair enough. I was just raising the point. But, so after this meeting, when everybody is abreast of the holodeck situation, we get our crew together to go inside the holodeck, which ultimately involves Picard, Data, and some guy, later to be joined by Crusher.
He's a historian.
Yes, but to the audience, he's some guy.
He's some guy, yeah. Data invites himself, which I have to say, I mean, come on, I like Data. We both love Data. I think this is the first time I've seen Data in these 11 episodes that I just wanted him to go away.
Yeah, it's like we said, he doesn't add anything.
Yeah. I guess we already went over that.
And he pulls attention from Picard. Like, I want to see Picard's reaction to everything that's going on.
And did you notice? So they go into the holodeck and they start talking to that guy at the newsstand, right? You notice both of these guys immediately do their best to completely take Picard mentally just out of this role play. What? Data starts quoting statistics.
Oh, yes.
The historian starts telling Picard about what happens in the near future from this point. Neither of them can stay in character,
which is the point.
It's the point, and Picard, who has invited them to share this experience with him, must be really kicking himself right now.
We've all been there. And it shows because once Picard is alone when he goes to get interrogated by the police, Crusher comes to join them at that time, and she talks to Data and the historian, and they're both like, oh yeah, Picard's having such a good time, having so much fun, getting into his character. And it's like they know what he's there for. They know that he's there to roleplay, and they're still just like, no, I'm gonna ruin it for you.
Yeah, I just don't understand why some people can't take role-playing seriously.
It's kind of offensive, really.
It is. I mean, you're trying to, get a few friends together for a fun night,
fun night of role
sitting
playing.
around the table, trying to role play. And then, one guy just has to break the fourth wall. That's his power or something. It's ridiculous. I don't have any patience for this. And this episode really triggered me in that regard.
I know exactly what you mean. To her credit, Crusher is not one of these people. Crusher joins in, and immediately she starts trying to emulate the golems around her. Like she sees enough.
Yeah, she learns how to be a woman.
Right. She's like, "Oh, what is this make up?" and starts applying it. And it's kind of cute. Like, just there's a moment where she's sitting next to another woman and just kind of like shifting her posture in a bunch of different small ways to mimic the golem woman, and that's a cute moment. It's followed by her and Picard openly flirting with each other, and
well, that's happened a couple times this episode.
Yeah, it's just strange because at one point they're like, "Let's go have sex in your character's office," and once again, Captain Killjoy, Data, and the historian are like, "All right, we'll come too."
I loved Crusher's reaction to that.
She was gonna get
just
some.
that exasperated eye roll. That was a good scene.
It was, but it was weird for it to be so openly sexual.
Yeah, and I would say even the previous scene with the two of them flirting in the meeting room was even weirder.
Yeah.
If you remember this. Picard gets very, very close to her face in front of his entire crew and asks her to join him on the holodeck.
I don't know what they were going for with this. Like, yes,
I think we know what they were going for.
Well, but why?
It's just awkward.
The two of them have history, of course, and that's established. And in The Naked Now, there's that moment where they're like under the effects of that intoxication and they're like throwing themselves at each other. So it's like, yeah, this is beneath the surface because that tends to happen when people are drunk. They kind of act on these deeply held feelings, and like it's there. It's not that this doesn't make sense, but for them to be so open about it while they're both like extremely professional people, is a little out of character.
I had the same impression. I wasn't sure if I was just being a killjoy, but since you're saying the same thing, I kind of felt that too. I didn't hate it.
No.
I didn't hate the end result, but it is jarring and doesn't really mesh so well with what we've seen so far from them.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's not problematic, but it is different.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I loved or hated those Crusher scenes when she's sitting there with the makeup.
I love them. I think they can
go either way.
They're part of like how this episode begrudgingly works, but I ended up enjoying them a lot. I mean, I like Crusher a lot. She's one of my more liked characters, which helps.
She was looking good too.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. It's just, do we live in a post-makeup, post-gum society?
The gum. See, that's like, it's fine to say we live in a post-gum society because that's the way you say it. It's Crusher doesn't like take the piece, unwrap it, and like hold it up to the light. Like, what is this? Is this food? Right. Instead, she just takes it, eats it, and swallows it immediately as if it were normal food, and is left with like the struggles of swallowing gum because it's not the easiest.
You are right. That was executed very well.
It's great because it is in the exact same episode not long after that automobile exchange, which is just different ends of the spectrum on how well to execute one of these things.
Right. Yeah, and I guess I didn't appreciate that enough, really. You really made me come around on that bit.
We did it.
So this is around the time that the aliens are probing the Enterprise, and it causes the malfunction in the holodeck.
Which is another thing that just makes zero sense with no explanation.
It's just a plot convenience.
Right. It's like, okay, we got probed and that messed with some of the holodeck's coding. So the natural conclusion is that these real people have become like code in the holodeck's program and no longer have their physical forms, because apparently if we shut the holodeck down, they might just go away with it.
Which is stupid.
It's incredibly
stupid. They're in a physical room right now.
Right. They're physical people. The holodeck, it's not magic. And it never purports to be magic, so you have to have some explanation on why this would be the conclusion of things, because when this initially happens, I don't even perceive a threat to be going on, because it's like, all right, they're just maybe the room shuts down, whatever. It's like going into laser tag and be like, oh no, the lasers are real. It's like, well, that doesn't really make sense. Could you explain that to me?
Yeah, it's so dumb. Lots of really dumb holodeck logic in this episode that thankfully does get rectified in later episodes. But
Yeah.
man, it just in and of itself, like, even if there was never another holodeck episode to compare this against, it's still so stupid.
It is. And a large part of that is just the lack of explanation. If they had attempted anything, then sure, I could have bought that. I've bought plenty of explanations I didn't understand a word of before, because it's like, sure, tachyons, whatever. Here, because you're left to come up with your own explanation, and because that's so difficult to do, it just doesn't track.
Right. Agreed.
So the plot inside of the holodeck kind of accelerates at like a rapid pace.
Yeah. Things come to a head very quickly.
They're at the police station. Picard's taken in for a murder, and then they're like, all right, I'll let you go. It's like, okay, well, that's done. Let's go see Picard's office. Oh, we're being held up at gunpoint. Like, very fast.
Yeah.
And there's a cute moment where, like, the historian gets shot by somebody accosting Picard, and
that is a key moment.
Everybody starts clapping for him because he gave such a realistic performance of getting shot.
That's right.
And then they're like, oh my god, he was shot. Oh no.
He says they're not supposed to be real.
Right. And that's how it's outed that there's a real threat to our characters, and for some reason they're inside the world of the holodeck completely.
Yes.
Which, whatever, I'll bury talking about that. We've already done that to death, but I'll just accept that they're in danger. And it's kind of neat to be like, all right, now you have to play by the rules of this scenario you've created for yourself. And there's a little bit of that where Picard is trying to negotiate using like some item that he doesn't really even know what it is. He's like, yeah, I'll get you your item, but we have to get this guy to a hospital or whatever. However, that is completely undermined by the crew's willingness to just tell these golems that they're golems and none of this is real. And it becomes this weird metaphysical discussion on the nature of reality.
I don't know. I kind of like the pathos of all that, from the golem's point of view, where they're not even sure if they're going to exist again if Picard and his crew just walk out of there.
The problem is before that, before like the door opens, they have no reason to believe any of this. Like, just, they're ostensibly real people. They're programmed to act like real people. So imagine you're just holding a guy at gunpoint, and he's just like, none of this is real. You're a computer
that's the thing. They don't.
Yeah, but
or are you saying it's stupid for him to have even tried that?
It's stupid for him to have tried it, but they don't believe him. But they entertain it for some amount of time. Like, not the cop, but the gangsters do.
Right. Red Block.
Completely forgot to introduce them. So they're being held up by some kind of what's that guy's name? The guy who was like a Weasley proto Steve Buscemi from those Var films.
I don't remember his name.
Peter something. This is gonna bother me. Whatever. But he's like a stand-in for that guy. He's got like a similar kind of snivelly voice, kind of strange looking. And he's the underling to fucking Lawrence Tierney, of all people, who just shows up in the episode, and you kind of do a double take. You're like, what? Of course, I remember working with him, but even then, it still takes me by surprise to just see Lawrence Tierney walk onto the screen of TNG. And I know we got some Lawrence Tierney stories. May as well knock these out of the way. So Lawrence Tierney is notable for a few reasons in the public eye. he came to public attention when he later went on to have a guest appearance on Seinfeld, and people heard all of the stories of him working on various productions and getting in violent fights or committing crimes while under contract and working. And
working with Tierney was probably one of our worst experiences thus far.
I would agree with that. It was dangerous, is what it was.
Yeah.
Very aggressive guy. While we were filming, he would often just goad the other actors or challenge them to fucking throw down in a physical altercation. Like,
right.
Brent, especially. Poor Brent. Anytime there was a break in their scenes, because, Brent Spiner and Tierney were in that shared scene at the end, he would just, like, square up with Brent and tell him to, like, just try me, as if to, like, instigate a fight with him. And, Brent obviously didn't want to fight. He would probably lose to Tierney, even though, the age difference was quite large, but he ended up so frustrated, he almost ended up taking a swing at the guy. But I think it was Michael who came in and saved the day and kind of diffused it all. And, Michael being large and imposing, was the only one who really could match up with Tierney in a way that would get the latter to back down.
Right.
If he didn't step in, I think Tierney would have ended up killing Brent. Just straight up. But I think it was worth the trouble. The final cut that we got.
Definitely was. It definitely was. I mean, it speaks for itself, of course.
It does.
The thing with Tierney is, even at the time, he was an older guy, right? I guess he had kind of built his career off of starring as, some kind of gangster in all these old movies, these old boring gangster movies, right?
Right.
So at some point, the streams kind of got crossed, and his personality just became that, right?
Yeah. The way that he talks in this episode with, like, that old-timey language, he just would use some of that. Yeah.
Yeah. He was. I wouldn't even call it acting, what he did in this episode. He was just reading lines from a script. That's just how he talks. And I remember a particularly disturbing morning that didn't end quite as well as Brent's confrontation with him.
God.
Where he steals this knife, right, from one of the service tables. God knows why. He just slips it in his pocket and starts walking away.
But a
so I go to
knife.
confront him about it. Yeah, it's just a knife.
A
but
weapon.
it's a knife. You know what I mean? Something that can do some damage.
Right.
So I walk up to him to confront him about it, and he just stands there, looks straight in my eyes, doesn't break contact for a single second. He pulls the knife out and just runs his tongue along the edge and walks away without a word.
Do you think that was like an intimidation tactic?
I don't know. I don't know if he was trying to intimidate me or if he actually is that insane. I mean, I think it's the latter, to be honest. Maybe it's a combination of both, but things got so heated on this set with this guy that you remember Frakes. Frakes eventually had enough and challenged him to a fist fight on set. Which I have to say was a bad idea on his part, because we ended up having to delay the filming of the remaining Riker scenes for almost a whole week.
It really threw a wrench into production. I mean, more so than just Tierney's presence in general did, but it almost feels like Tierney won in the end. Like he provoked somebody enough to
well, he did
to meet him on his level. It interrupted production, and Tierney still got paid.
Yeah.
So,
and we have probably dozens more of these stories. Like these were not isolated incidents. He caused a problem probably every single day.
Yeah. I think that was often the threat from the writers. It's like if somebody was like fucking with them or causing the writers trouble, they'd be like, "Oh, we're going to write another episode with Tierney in it." So
you want us to bring Tierney back?
Exactly. And it was tongue in cheek, but you always had the sense that they kind of meant it too, because the writers they didn't have to be there for filming itself. Like they could just kind of submit the script and leave if they didn't want to supervise their episode. So it had an element of truth to it.
Yeah, no one really wanted to test it.
No,
understandably.
Nobody wanted to find out. So, but Tierney himself in like the finished product, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed his presence enough to like divorce the production from the product. It gave a lot of credibility, I think, to this noir scene.
It definitely did. Yes. I think he really did shine in this scene. I think without him, it wouldn't have been nearly as good, actually.
It wouldn't have. And it feels like there's a real threat there. More so than just like a guy getting shot. It's like, wow, Lawrence Tierney, this gangster's a wild fucking animal. What's he gonna do?
Right.
And he's like a very imposing guy. He's like, no, don't shoot him. Shoot the woman. Just very kind of straight up evil in a lot of ways. Which I appreciated. It's there were clumsy parts of that scene, but that was one of the things that worked, I feel.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, so where were we? Oh God, I got so distracted by the Tierney talk.
You got Tierneyed. The tyranny of Tierney.
I got Tierneyed.
So
yeah, wow, there you go.
Meanwhile, while this interaction is happening in the holodeck, they are trying to fix this from the outside. They being the Enterprise crew. Geordi and Wesley Crusher are sent to investigate things by Riker. And
yes.
During that, Riker attempts communication with the Harada, but they rebuff him for not being the captain because they don't. Talking to anybody but the captain is dishonorable to them. Whatever. We got to solve this quick, otherwise the Harada are going to get pissed and ruin our relations with them. Ticking clock. So when they go to like tinker with the holodeck from the outside and attempt to fix it, they basically do that instantly. And they're like, Wesley Crusher to captain, we can fix this problem, but if we fail, everybody inside will die instantly. And that's because, and this is where Riker says, I don't care why, just do it. Just very willing to throw everybody's life in jeopardy. Wesley Crusher, too, shows basically no hesitation to doing something that might result in the death of his own mother. Just, again, instantly just does the thing, and it works instantly. So, okay. Problem solved.
Oh, yeah, I mean, of course, Wesley saves the day once again. I have not been keeping a running count, but we got to be up to, like, the 5th or 6th time by now, right?
Definitely.
And, yeah, Riker's character thus far has been, I don't know, very, very poorly defined. Between this and the Q episode, I don't even know who Riker is.
I feel that. He's just like playing with people's lives, just making snap decisions without consultation or reflection.
Right.
I don't know how he's fit to be first officer, number one.
Yeah, that's a great question because he's so far just been completely irresponsible,
that's a good word
he's done relatively nothing. So. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, look, he in the middle of a crisis on the ship, he sits down with his head in his hands and watches a 12-year-old boy save the day. One of his crewmates is getting married, so he decides to pout all day about it. Q gives him powers, I guess, and 2 minutes later he starts thinking he can address Picard by his first name.
In this episode,
at the drop of a hat.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, go ahead.
No, go. We need more examples.
In this episode, he is reluctant to even send Wesley Crusher to go work on this because Crusher's like, "Oh, I'll go too," and Riker's like, "No, don't go. We need you to do something else." And then Geordi tells him, "Well, his mother life is at stake too, and only then does Riker relent to allowing Crusher to do the work that ultimately saves the day.
Actually, Troy tells him
Oh, Troy tells him. All right.
she has to stand up and say dumb woman stuff. Yeah, and when you bring it up like that, this guy has personally watched Wesley at least save the day twice.
Right.
At least. So, and they were both engineering related. So
Just
why
like
not
this
send this kid to engineering? Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, Riker at the drop of a hat just decides to be an asshole for no reason, as the script demands.
Right. And narratively,
and not likable.
What is the purpose of him denying Crusher the chance first, only to give in a second later? Like, what function in the script does that serve?
Right.
It just establishes Riker as kind of a hard ass who doesn't think things through.
Did they think we'd be wondering why he let Wesley go?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really cares what Wesley does.
You can't be like, oh, why would they allow a teenager to go solve this problem after you've shown him solving numerous problems and getting promoted to honorary ensign, like, well ahead of the time, and having the Traveler be like, oh, that Wesley Crusher is going to do great things, great extra dimensional
He's going to
things.
evolve. Yeah.
It doesn't track. It's just kind of dumb. And Riker, I think he's just the victim of all this, where they've felt the need to answer that question nobody asked of why Wesley's allowed to do things, and Riker's always the vessel of the first person to turn it
right.
down. Kind of how Worf is always the one to suggest something and then get shot down for really no reason. He's just the victim of like something they needed for the writing. And Riker is kind of the same way.
It's a script convenience.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So they fix the problem, and the door to the holodeck opens, and it appears in Picard's office, or Dixon's office, I guess. And at this point, everybody's like, "Oh, you are from a different world! Oh my god!" And this is where we get the silliest shot of the episode, where Tierney's character and his underling just step out into the hallway of the Enterprise and start like disintegrating because they're just pieces of data. And they have this like monologues like, no, you can't destroy me.
They can't do this to me.
Yeah.
Don't you know who I am? And he's standing there just static. Right. Like he could have just walked right back in, but he just stands there and has a little temper tantrum and disappears.
Very silly.
It was so stupid. Like that was not fun silly. That was dumb silly.
That was dumb silly. And the framing of that shot too was like their entire bodies were in frame. The camera was pulled back. It's
almost a parody of itself. Yeah. Yeah, and then we're treated to that emotional scene of Picard saying that the golem, his golem friend, may not exist when he leaves that room.
Right.
Which, I think in a slightly more competent or differently structured episode, this is a cool question to ask.
Yeah, I think that this could have benefited from having a longer runtime, whether maybe as a two-parter episode. Because if you would like interspersed their time in the holodeck with moments like this to build up to it,
yes.
Rather than cram it all into the final 7 minutes of the show, it would have been a lot deeper and a lot more intellectually stimulating if you had these characters thinking and talking about this for a while.
Right, and I would go so far as to say that it could really hold its own as the central plot of an episode. A sentient holodeck golem comes to terms with the idea that he might not exist. I think that's kind of interesting.
It is, and that happens a lot in Star Trek, I think, where there's a kernel of an idea somewhere that's not given the proper amount of time to develop.
Yeah. Here it's just tacked on at the end, and
we
nothing really comes.
We literally have a character say to another one, "So this is the big goodbye."
He said the name of the episode.
He did.
That automatically adds 1 point to the score.
I appreciated that line, cheesy as it is, because it does feel like a line from a noir film.
It does. It does. It sounds just cheesy enough.
Right. It's overly melodramatic, but that's exactly what
Mhm.
they're going for.
Right.
So that
Also
kinda
against
worked.
track.
So once they get out of the holodeck and that's all done, Picard resolves the B plot in like 15 seconds, record time.
Yeah. All you had to do was say a thing.
Right. He walks onto the
and-
bridge and like very exasperatedly, frustratedly, just belts out the Haradan greeting, and
Mhm.
then they're like, "Okay, you did it, Picard. Let's have happy ever after." And
Yeah. Now they're friends. I assume they're going to join the Federation or something, or at least they're going to have, maybe trade relationships or something like that. All because Picard memorized a 15-second line.
right,
And no one else could do that before, by the way.
no, and there was no gravity paid to this.
No.
It's not like Picard. You've been in the holodeck and under pressure for the past several hours. How are you going to do this? Are you okay? Like, are you going to be able to say the line?
He just walks on there.
Yeah, he just walks on, like loosens his tie because he's just fucking tired, and he's like, "All right," and then he finishes.
I think there's an argument for that actually working better with this episode. Just that completely inconsequential resolution to the B plot, because everything else in the episode has already been so silly.
That's true. I can appreciate that argument, but it feels very much like a rationalization to me.
I don't know. I could almost see it being intentional for them to just say, "Yeah, silly episode is going to have a silly conclusion." But you might be right.
Maybe that's a very charitable outlook on your part.
What can I say? I just love this episode, Mitch.
Why does this episode work? Like, we both agreed that we just kind of liked it for some reason, but
it works in spite of the countless mistakes that it makes that we already went over. The data stuff, the people not knowing stuff that happened 200 years ago.
The rushed pacing.
Yeah, it's really what it is, and I think we tend to see this quite a bit. The Picard stuff is just so good that it overshadows all of the negative qualities of the episode.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
And that's it. If you could take just the Picard scenes and mash them together and still get a coherent episode, I would recommend people just do that, to be honest, rather than watch the whole thing. But unfortunately, you can't do that.
Right. I think we mentioned how this idea had a lot more potential, and that stings a lot more because the B plot is so rushed and nothing. So had that just been excised completely, it's like you would have had more time for this. The pacing could have slowed down. It's a shame. I want to raise one point in that this episode, the events of this episode, are exactly what Barclay gets excoriated for later on in the series. And I don't think that's particularly fair for him.
Remind me again how it's the same?
So Barclay has an episode where he has like a holodeck addiction, and he's always in the holodeck creating elaborate power fantasies for himself. And people don't like that. It's like, Barclay, it's not healthy to use the holodeck like this to take these excursions.
It's the difference between playing one game of Quake and devoting your life to it, though, isn't it?
Is it, though? Because Picard went into the holodeck like only a couple hours before he was due to have this big meeting with the Harada.
Well, Picard's also not making sex dolls of his subordinates.
I mean, he's making out with somebody within minutes of being in there. So even if it's not his subordinates, he's still.
It is a little irresponsible, but he couldn't have accounted for the power outage.
I'm just saying that, justice for Barclay.
Yeah, and we do get it. Don't worry, audience. We do get justice for Barclay, even though we haven't gotten to him yet.
We won't for a very long time.
I don't know if you have any other points.
No, not really.
All right, I want to posit a question.
Okay.
Who is more honorable, the Harada or the Klingons?
Oh, that's a question. That didn't even occur to me how this society based completely on honor and valuing that so highly might also cut into the Klingon slice of the pie.
Yeah.
I want to say the Harada because the Klingons don't hold other races to like standards with their language.
They don't kill them for mispronouncing something.
Right. Like Picard speaks Klingon several times throughout the series, and it's never really noted the pressure of doing it correctly.
Right.
So I guess the Harada are more honorable. Well, they care more about honor, but I think the Klingons are more honorable. If you catch my drift.
That's a good way to take it. Yeah. That's it. I mean, I have nothing else to add to that.
No, it's a good point to raise.
It's pretty
because
dry.
It's like, oh, these things are overlapping. There's only so many concepts in the world that to base an alien race on, and we've already rounded it back to honor twice.
I'm sure we'll see it again. Lots of honorable races in Star Trek, or honor focused races. All right, so I guess we will move on to trivia, huh?
Awesome.
Got another pretty simple question for you. It's probably going to be a shot in the dark for you.
Okay. Well, I'm 0 for 3 now, I believe.
Yes.
One day.
Do you remember when
is that the question?
Harada? Yeah, I'm asking you.
Okay. Oh, I could say, do you remember? Period or question mark? And like, well,
do you remember?
That's a tough
one. Do you remember when the Harada next show up?
No.
Not even a guess.
Okay. Jesus. That's the questions. When the Harada next show up?
Yes.
Okay.
You can give me something like vague. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like this specific.
I'm gonna narrow it down to 2 possibilities: that they either show up very soon, like immediately, or they show up in like the 7th season, very late. I don't think the Harada show up in the middle of the series run, because, and I'm basing this on some meta knowledge, I don't think you would ask this question if the Harada just like had 3 appearances in season 5 and 2 in season 4, like regular or anything. I think it would have to be more notable than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to go with the very next episode.
Oh, all right. Well, Mitch, they actually do reappear smack dab in the middle of the series.
God damn it!
In a paperback novel called Imbalance, where despite Picard having established diplomatic relations with them, they kidnap the entire crew, and Picard has to save them.
In an honorable way?
I guess. I'm not sure because I haven't read it, but I just thought that was a fun little retcon.
You ever see Space Ghost Coast to Coast?
Oh, of course.
You know Brack?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I picture the Harada looking like.
That's a good visual image.
Right. There's these,
I mean, they are ridiculous enough. They sound stupid.
Yeah, and they're like apparently insects, so I imagine them as having this like angry face.
That's perfect.
Like big pincers. Perfect. Yeah.
Wow.
So, damn it. I am 0 for 4 now. But
well,
my time
you'll
will
get
come.
one soon. Yeah.
You might have to give me a softball, like what is the name of the ship that the crew serves on? And I'll be able to get that one.
Well, I'll try to think of one that is a little easier next time.
Can't wait. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Readier Room. Join us next time on the Readier Room, where I will hopefully answer some trivia correctly. And until then, everybody, stay ready.
The troublesome little man-child.
Consider that in the history of many worlds, there have always disposable creatures.
Do you consider yourself superior to us?
Should have told him to mind his own damn business.
When I stroke the beard thusly, do I not appear more intellectual?
Computer! Freeze program. It's not a promising beginning.